My name is Mela Hernandez Ortesia, and today I'm gonna do the first book club assignment. And my book is about a stolen life, which is a memoir by J.C. Dugard, and it focuses. I'm gonna be talking about the beginning of the book up through the section titled Easter, and the reading was very difficult, not just because of the content, but also because, it's written from her own words and her own perspective. And she reflects a lot on the events that happened to her when she was only 11 years old. Um, so, what stood out to me immediately is how quiet the writing is. So, JC isn't trying to shock the reader or dramatize what happened to her during this experience. Instead, she just describes everything very plainly, very normal, like, which in a way it makes everything feel more disturbing and real. So, before I get into the details, I do want to say that the book is very uncomfortable to talk about. This story forces you to confront the realities about abuse and power that, many people would rather just ignore. But obviously, this doesn't mean that they shouldn't be told. It's often the stories that make us uncomfortable that teach us the most. So, as I go through this whole section, I'm just gonna summarize what happened, and then I'll be explaining why certain moments of the story stood out to me the most emotionally and psychologically, because the book isn't just about what happened to her, it's also about survival. So, the book begins with JC describing a very normal morning. She's at home, she's waking up and getting ready for school. She's just thinking normal kid things. How's school gonna be today? Like, will I be able to do this and that? And everything feels very ordinary. But very quickly we learn that her home life isn't very emotionally safe. She talks a lot about her relationship with her stepfather, and it's very clear that he's so cold, he's so dismissive, and he's just outright mean to her. And he doesn't treat her with any warmth or any care. She feels like she does not belong in her own home. And obviously, as a reader, this made me very uncomfortable and very sad for her because, you know, it just shows that JC already felt unwanted even before anything traumatic even happened to her. So, one detail that stood out to me was how badly she always wanted a pet. And, wanting a pet is such a normal thing for a child to want, but she's repeatedly told no by her stepfather. And, that might seem small, just on its own, but thinking about how her stepfather made her feel, and the only reason why she wasn't allowed a pet is because her stepfather blatantly did not want her to have that little joy. So, it does represent how little comfort she was allowed to have in her own home. Another major point in this is that JC doesn't even want to walk to school alone. She's very scared, she's very uncomfortable, but of course, her stepfather insists that she's old enough and that it would be good for her. And, the other thing that really frustrated me despite this was that her mother wouldn't be able to take her to school because she works very early in the morning and long hours. Yet her stepfather was at home most of the time, yet still decided not to take her to school. And that's such a basic responsibility to want to protect the child that you claim to love. So that part just really frustrated me. And I don't want to put all the blame on what happened on her family or her stepdad, but I do think that emotional neglect can leave a child more exposed to harm because her mother, yes, she worked long hours, but she would never defend JC during the moments where the stepfather was being mean to her. So that part really frustrated me as well. Now, children who appear very isolated or unsupported are often targeted, and JC walking alone every single day just made her more, predictable and visible to predators. So, one thing that really stood out to me in the early section as well was, just how often that she was dismissed when she talked about not wanting to walk alone. She isn't taken seriously at all. And over time, this does teach the child that speaking up doesn't matter. That silence, and that can be really dangerous because children are taught to obey adults, not to question them. And JC learns early on that, adults don't always protect you, even when you ask, especially her stepfather. Now, this part of the book also really made me think about how prevention isn't just warning your kids about strangers. It's also about creating environments where children feel safe, being heard and believed. So, moving on to the next section is when she is beginning to walk to school and she's leaving the house. And during this moment, she describes as being lost in her thoughts. She's thinking about an upcoming field trip. She's just thinking normal kid things. She's not anxious or alert about anything. She's just being a normal child. And this part was really, it made just everything more disturbing because everything seemed normal, but then all of a sudden, everything just completely changed for her. So, a van approaches her in the street, and at first, she assumes that the van will just drive past her. Instead, the van stops, and a man leans out and starts talking to her. She doesn't immediately panic because she has no reason to believe that this adult is gonna do anything to her. He hasn't said anything bad, just, talking to her. And that part really stood out to me because it shows how predators really rely on, politeness and trust before using any violence. Like they make you believe, oh, I'm just a nice human being and I'm not here to hurt you. But then suddenly everything escalates. And in this situation, the man gets out of the van and uses a taser on her. And when he tases her, she physically falls back onto the ground. And she also talked about this further in the book that she gripped onto something behind her. And at first, she didn't know what it was until years later. So I will talk about that in the next book club assignment. But um, after this, she is forced inside the van, and she remembers seeing another person in the van with the captor in her. But everything happens so fast that she can't really process it, especially since she got her face covered and everything. So, in a matter of seconds, everything just completely changed for her, and nothing would ever be the same. Basically, her entire life is just taken from her in that moment. So during this, JC wasn't doing anything risky. She wasn't breaking the rules. She wasn't, making any bad choices. She was literally just walking to school like a normal kid. So this really challenges the idea that victims somehow cause what happens to them because She didn't make any mistakes. She was literally targeted by these sick individuals. And the kidnapping also challenges the myth of stranger danger because the man doesn't appear threatening at first. I mean, he speaks very calmly, like I said. So, this shows that predators often appear very ordinary and not suspicious at all. And a lot of the times, kids, even if you tell them, no, like if it's a stranger, don't talk to them. If kids see, like, oh, this person seems nice, it's like they don't really think that anything bad is going on. So it's really hard to prevent something like that from happening, unless you're always with your child, or in this instance, if you would have taken your child to school. But obviously, the speed of the attack is very important too, because people often imagine a kidnapping to be super long and like screaming everywhere, like help, help, but in reality, they're very fast. And 1 second, you're just walking, and the next you're like in a van moving somewhere. And that's exactly how she describes it. So that just made it even more disturbing because you think that, but if you see something, do something, but it's too fast and nobody would be able to see something. And even if somebody would see something, what are the chances that they would actually speak out and say anything? So it's complicated. But after Casey is taken, she is brought to this place that she can't really remember. As she is walking through this place, she's trying to remember, okay, it's like how many steps from here to there, because she's thinking about, what if they find me, I'll be able to describe as much as I know about this place, so that they'd be able to find the people who did this to me. Now, while she's walking in this place, she is taking into a shower, and inside, the captor is telling her, okay, so you're gonna remove all your clothes and you're gonna get inside. And she was very confused. She obviously doesn't understand anything that's happening to her, but she knows that something is obviously very wrong. Especially after the man enters the shower with her, also naked, and starts just speaking to her in very sexual and inappropriate ways. And, during this, I want to try to describe it, but not completely, because it's very graphic. The way that he speaks to her, it's like he speaks to her in a way that, a child is what I'm speaking to, but it's so, the reason behind it is so like nefarious and just wrong. Obviously, she doesn't understand what he's talking about during that moment, but she obviously does whatever he says because she has no control over the situation, and she just wants to get this over and done with. She doesn't want to be there anymore. You know, this she cries for her mother. She's just wanting to for the situation to be over as soon as possible. Obviously, this detail really stayed with me because it reminds us that young people are very helpless. And she's only 11 years old in this situation. It's just she's even more helpless. And after this whole shower situation, she is moved into a room where she is handcuffed, and she is left alone inside the room. So she loses track of time very easily. The room only has a window that she can't see because she's handcuffed, and it doesn't have like a toilet or like a bathroom or anything for her to shower, like no table and stuff like that for her to eat. So she has no way of keeping track of time. The captor does bring her food like the first couple of days during night, as always. but she tries to keep the straws from like the juice boxes. But at the end, he always takes away all the trash, and she isn't able to keep any of that. But um, she doesn't know what day it is. She doesn't know how long she's been there. She's constantly thinking like, when is my mom gonna pick me up? She's gonna pick me up. Is my stepfather looking for me? Do they even care that I'm gone? Then it moves on to the first very traumatic thing that she has to go through. The first rape, which occurs at night, which is the time that he would always come in to the room. And the captor this time tells her that things are gonna be different. So JC doesn't quite understand exactly what that means. She, during the situation that was happening, she describes it being very confused, very scared, in pain. After the fact, she notices bleeding on her lower area, and she panics because she thinks that something is going on with her. But the captor just dismisses it like it's something completely normal, out of the ordinary, as if that was something that normally happens to an 11-year-old, which is not. That part made me more frustrated and infuriated than, because he described it as being something just completely normal. Like, what he's doing is not wrong, and that made me very upset. So this section was especially difficult to read because of that, especially knowing that she was only 11 years old. Now, um this part was also important because while everything was going on, she describes dissociating during the whole situation. She is Dissociation means when the mind separates from the body, and in order to survive any overwhelming trauma. And during this, she, instead of fighting back, JC just mentally leaves the situation, and she focuses on just anything else just to get through the moment. Obviously, this matters because people often judge victims based on how they respond. JC didn't always scream or resist. She was just doing what she had to do to survive. And compliance is not consent. Freezing or in place or anything like that isn't agreeing to the trauma. These are just survival responses. Of course, understanding this is very essential in criminal justice, because without knowing this and the trauma informed perspectives, victims can be very misunderstood, or they can be blamed for behaviors that were necessary for survival. That's where we get comments like, oh, but it's not like you pushed him away, you didn't scream, you didn't do anything, so clearly you didn't say no. Like, it's not like you didn't want it, you know and those comments, just for a victim to hear, it's just even more, it's adding more to the trauma, and people don't even realize it. So while she was staying in that little room, um because he was the only man that she was having human contact with, JC begins to feel a confusing attachment to him. This isn't love at all. It's like a trauma bond. So humans need, connection. And, when somebody is just completely isolated, even their abuser becomes a point of attachment. She was constantly relying on him, on food, on, everything. So it's understandable for her to become attached to him in that way. Obviously, JC is constantly missing her mother. Again, she's wondering if anybody is out there looking for her. She thinks a lot about the basic routines that she doesn't get to have here, like brushing her teeth or showering. things that her stepfather used to nag her about. And the contrast of this really struck me because things that felt like a chore before, like felt very annoying, now feel very comforting and familiar to her. So, at one point, JC is given a cat. Now, she had been asking for this cat for a while now, since being there, because she had no other type of interaction with anybody else but him. And obviously, this becomes very meaningful to her that she got the cat. I mean, the cat really represented very companionship, responsibility, comfort, or in the situation where she has absolutely no control. But eventually, the cat is taken away, and she experiences yet another loss. But at the same time, she also feels the relief of knowing that the cat will be safer elsewhere because this room was very small. The cat had no space to move around and just be a cat. So this moment really stood out to me because it shows that the trauma hasn't taken away her empathy. Even in being a captive, JC still clearly cares about other people. And after this part is when they talk about these runs, as he described it, the captor. Basically, during this part of the book, he was talking to JC, um, obviously in a childlike kind of way, describing that from now on, things are going to be even more different. So he would talk to her saying that he has a high um he was able to take a lot of drugs, and yet he wouldn't be like all of his other friends. He had high endurance when it came to that. So this would make him last longer. And during these runs, basically, he would have her dress up in very adult clothes, adult makeup, and have her do these incredibly disgusting sexual acts, kind of like a way to fulfill his fantasies. And a lot of the times he would describe this, like the reason that he was putting her through this, as being, you're gonna help me with my sexual problems. That way I don't have to hurt anybody else. That part was especially frustrating to me because in his mind, if I'm not sure what he was thinking, but I assume that in his mind he thought, if I just use you for this, then I don't have to touch anybody else, and that makes me a good person because I'm not hurting anybody else. Yet he doesn't think about her, JC, in this situation, and the fact that she's going through all of this traumatic, um, just everything because he is the one with the problem. And JC also further talks about, you know, thinking in her mind that she felt like she was helping him in a way, and that, you know, if he was hurting her, then he wouldn't be hurting other kids. And in a way, he was kind of helping. Of course, further down, JC then learns that the second person that she saw during the kidnapping was actually the captor's wife. So this adds a whole new layer of trauma because instead of helping JC, the wife becomes jealous of her. She resents all the attention that her husband is giving to a literal child. And this is an example of betrayal trauma. Another adult, especially a woman in this situation, just fails to protect her and instead decides to contribute to her suffering, because the wife's involvement just removes any hope that another adult might rescue her. And having another um predator in this situation just increases the severity of the trauma for JC. Now she's not just trying to survive him, now she's, going through this environment where it's controlled by two people who clearly are there to hurt her. This part made me especially angry because it shows how adults can prioritize their own emotions over a child's safety. It also shows that, abuse can be enabled, silent, jealousy, these are all forms of harm, because the wife, she hasn't, it's the beginning of the book, she hasn't done anything yet, but she did not contact the police. She decided to protect her husband from, you know, just completely enabling his behavior like it's something okay to do. And that part made me very upset because it's another woman that's doing this to a child, you know? So that part just made me um more angry as well. But um towards the end of this section, it's JC's birthday. She feels very hopeful that, maybe, just maybe, she will be acknowledged today and given something special. But instead, the wife comes into the room and she sits on top of the little bed and she asks, do you notice anything different, to JC? And the captor also asks her, like, do you notice anything different? And she starts looking around, the room, like, oh, is there something for me? Is there a surprise? Like, she keeps looking, very confused, and he's like, do you notice any different? And then she's like, well, no, what is it? And it turns out that the only change is that his wife has dyed her hair. And at this moment, it is very heartbreaking because it was her birthday. It was something, meant to celebrate her. But instead, in this situation, it just becomes another reminder of the control and just the disappointment, because she was really expecting something special on her day, yet it's like she was reminded that, yeah, never mind, this is no longer the life that I used to have. And expecting these sort of things, just, it's not realistic whatsoever. But up to this section, the book really shows how the trauma was unfolding over time. It's not just one event that happens, it's ongoing, it's one after the other. It's first the shower, then the first rape, after nights of rapes, on top of the runs that they start to do. And on top of that was also the husband encouraging the wife to participate in the trauma and participate in everything that they were doing. Now, up to this point in the book, the wife has not agreed to anything yet. So I'm hoping that she doesn't as I go through the full book. But at the same time, I would be very disappointed yet not surprised if she does end up partaking in the abuse. Obviously, JC's survival isn't anything dramatic. She's just enduring everything as quietly as she possibly can. Obviously, the book challenged my understanding of victim behavior. Really reinforced why these trauma informed approaches are very, very important in criminal justice, victim advocacy, because it does teach us a lot more than we know about, things that these victims go through. And even though the reading was very, very difficult to just get through, it's very important to read this book because, her voice matters, and JC's story forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about abuse, control, survival, and you know, I think this book really does have some very good points that could teach a lot of individuals about victim behavior.